In this video, I'm going to cover the SarvaAshtakavarga, which is the compilation of the Ashtakavarga points. I'm going to do a lot more things with the individual Ashtakavargas. What I've taught so far on the individual Ashtakavargas are just like the very basics of Ashtakavarga, and off that there's a lot of things you can do with it, which I will talk about. But I wanted to first cover the very basics of the SarvaAshtakavarga before I get into more complex things. So with SarvaAshtakavarga, we simply take the Ashtakavargas of all the planets and add them up. So for instance, if we consider that the Sun has 3 points in Aries, the Moon gets 5, Mars gets 3, and so on for the other planets, and we add all those points up, we get 26 points. And that's the, the cumulative effect of the Ashtakavarga, the total points basically. For this, we don't calculate the points the logna gives. For some reason, they only use the planets in this. Okay? Now, based on that, planet or sign, will have a certain amount of points in it. Those points can be very little to up to 50, possibly. You'll rarely see something below 20, and you'll rarely see something above 40, but it is possible. Okay? So all kinds of arrangements are possible depending on, simply where the planets are in the birth chart. So with respect to the points, Parashar tells us, not there, somewhere else, hold on. Okay, Parashar tells us that 25 to 30 points the average amount of points. So if you see a sign that has 25 to 30 points, it's about average. Okay, it's like your the actual average is 28. If we were to total up all the points here in the Ashtakavarga, we get 337 points. And when we divide 337 points by 12 signs, 28.3 or something is the average. So 28 is considered like the middle ground. So anything above 28 is a little better than average. Anything below 28 starts getting low. But Parashar kind of breaks it into 25 to 30 points being average. More than 30 is fortunate, and less than 25 is unfortunate. Now, we want to really look at this as saying fortunate and unfortunate, not necessarily good or bad. What fortune is, bhagya as it's called in Sanskrit, it's a person's share in life. 25 to 30 points gives a person a fair share, meaning that sign will give the fair amount of opportunities. More than 30 will make them fortunate, which means their share is more than average. Less than 25 means their share is less than average. Okay? So, look at it that way. Now, another thing to look at with Ashtakavarga, right away you're going to notice, like say you take a person's 7th house and you say, oh, it's 26 points, it's less than average. No, you're not going to get married. Don't jump to a conclusion like that, you won't be right. Okay? Or if you see 40 points in the 7th house, don't jump to the conclusion and say, oh, your partnership and marriage life will be great. You'll find lots of charts with 40 points in the 7th that don't have marriage. You'll find charts with 20 points in the 7th that are married a long time. So you have to again use Ashtakavarga in the context of what it's actually doing, okay, and not expect it to do something it's not going to do. So what the SarvaAshtakavarga is doing is it's saying, okay, the Sun gets 3 points when it travels through Aries. So the Sun, as it travels through Aries, is getting supported to 3 out of 8 points. It's not really well supported, and that's because it's not really well supported. As it travels through the 1st house, it's not going to be able to do much for the 1st house. Then the Moon gets 5 points in Aries. So as the Moon goes through the 1st house, it's going to support the 1st house. It is supported itself, and since it's supported, it's going to help provide for the 1st house. So basically the idea is a planet that's supported is able to provide for the house that it's going through as it's supported. So if the Moon's doing good, the house it's traveling through is going to do good. And so if we consider that over time there's going to be 7 planets traveling through a sign, Some, being supportive, more supportive, some being less supported. Those planets will better be able to augment the house or not augment the house. Okay? But augment is one of those, vague words. Augment doesn't always mean a sure thing. It augments the house. So how I look at that is that the transits are sort of the environmental influences. Simply what the environment is providing to us, the opportunities the environment gives to us. Now, all of you know, especially people who've done charts and worked with people, that people will oftentimes have an opportunity presented to themselves by the environment. It's in their reality, but they don't want to take it. There's something about them that doesn't allow them to take it. They may be closed off. So let's say you get a person who's got, 50 points of Ashtakavarga in the 7th house. That means their environment is really going to support them in having a relationship. But let's say they have Saturn, Rahu, and Moon in that 7th house. They're going to be extremely scared and closed off from having a relationship. So even though the environment might be supporting relationship possibilities to them, if they're completely closed off to it, they're going to be completely closed off to it. And that's how you want to look at these points in these houses. This shows that the environment is supporting that house to a greater or lesser degree, okay, through the motions of the planets, through the overall collective effect of the planets over time. So over time, all the planets are going to transit through all the houses and support a house to a certain degree. And so that'll average out to a certain amount of points, which is these points here. Okay? It doesn't mean that person's house is always doing good or always bad if it's low points. It just means over the period of their lifetime, as all the transits revolve around and around, overall that house is going to get more environmental support. Okay? The world's going to support the fruition of that house to them, provide opportunities. But if you find a case where a person isn't really, they got high points in a house, but they're not really getting a lot of that house, you're always going to find that there's something about them that's closing that off. Okay, they're closing it off somehow. For example of that, here's a person who has 31 points, okay? They haven't had luck in relationships. They've had like one very short relationship. They're 37 years old. And they've had like one short relationship and that's it. And you go, well, there's 31 points in the 7th house. Should have lots of opportunity for partnerships. The world should be supporting it. But if we look at her chart, her 7th lord is in the 5th, which is not a good yoga for relationships. Mars is sleeping in Virgo. It's in a natural enemy sign. And everything is everything's ashamed in this 5th house. The 7th lord's ashamed, the moon is ashamed, Jupiter's ashamed. So she simply feels too bad to take any opportunities. She's very much closed off out of that shame of that 5th house and all those shamed planets in the 5th house, that she's too closed off to benefit fully from or to benefit much at all from those 31 points. Okay? Whenever we get 4 planets in a house, it can destroy that house, right? Unless it's the 1st, 9th, or 10th. Here it's in the 5th house, and to top it off, 2 of those planets are Saturn and Rahu. So, Jupiter, the Karaka for a man, for the husband, is shamed and starved. And it also is delighted by the moon, and it's, delighted by Mars. But again, it's got Rahu and Saturn with it. It's just not a pretty picture. So, in extreme cases like that, don't expect the Ashtakavarga house to turn their charts around. Okay? This person, on the other hand, had 26 points in their 7th house, which is less than average. So you'd think, well, not a really good chance of getting married for this person. However, in their chart, we'll see the 7th lord is in the 11th Rashi, which is the house of gains. And when the 7th lord's in the 11th, it's actually a yoga for early marriage. It's also, whereas the 7th lord in the 5th is a yoga for no marriage. This is a yoga for marriage early. And Venus is also in a natural friend sign, and it's delighted in the sign of a friend. And it's got in a great friend sign. So it's a completely different path of relationships for her. So this person got married, okay? But these points are still going to have an influence on her, okay? And that influence is that the environment is not really supporting her relationship. Well, the marriage she took, the environment of their lives, did not support them being together as much as an average couple. Okay, so she was married, but she wasn't in a partnership mode as much as your average marriage. She was with her husband less than an average amount. Okay, an average amount is people work 5 days a week, and then they're around for each other one day on the weekend, and then they're of course in the evenings and mornings. Consider that average, all right? But this person would spend weeks at a time when their husband was not available to them. So they had less than an average amount of partnership. The environment, the concrete, real environment of their lives didn't allow for that much partnership activity to take place. Okay? Whereas this other person that I showed you that had 31 points in the 7th, if they actually didn't have yogas preventing marriage, if they actually got married, the world would really provide for them to have a more than average amount of time with each other, which means they would spend both their weekend days together. Saturday and Sunday they would be together instead of just one, which is kind of more the typical. So that's how you want to use this. And if you start seeing big differences in a person's sign in Ashtakavarga that has high houses, and them not having that house, then you always know there's something in them that's blocking it. And that's one of the really neat uses of Ashtakavarga. When a person comes in and complains and says, oh, I can't, find a man, I can't fall in love, whatever, look at their 7th house. How many points is there? If it's high points, then there's obviously something about them that's keeping it from happening. Because in life we have two things: the environment, which is the transits, what's happening around the world around us, which is the transits, and then there's us, okay? And the more limiting factor is us. For ultimately health, true health is the ability to live in the moment, okay? To live honestly in the moment with what that moment requires. Which means if the moment requires partnership activity, that's the mentality we're in. We're ready for partnership activity. If the moment requires running for our lives because we're getting chased by a tiger, we're happy to run for our lives while we get chased for a tiger. So a healthy mentality is designed to do that, to always respond and live in alignment with the world. But lack of health is a person who gets invited to go out with their friends and says, no, I don't feel like it, and then sits home at being lonely. That's all due to a person's own inner mechanisms and the distortions to that. Okay, that's their disease. So the Ashtakavarga is just showing the opportunities that the planets are presenting with. The planets are supporting these houses, supporting the possibilities of these houses. And how much will the person be able to take advantage of that depends on their own inner mechanism. Okay? So always keep that in mind. And so learn to use Ashtakavarga in the context of that. Okay? So when we use Ashtakavarga, to use it correctly as a standalone technique with nothing else, we'll simply say to this person with 26 points, we'll say, your relationship, your partnership activities are not strongly supported. They're a little less supported than they are. And you can say, and this doesn't mean you won't get married, but the world will support less partnership activity for you, a little less than average. With the person at 31 points, you could say, well, your world, the life you live will support a lot of partnership activity once you find a partner. Okay, but don't guarantee that they're going to find a partner just because they have high points there. But tell them once they have a partner, expect a lot of the world around them supporting them, spending time together and doing a lot of stuff together, okay, and being in partnership more. That's how you want to use Ashtakavarga. And in that context, it'll be correct and accurate. But if you try to use Ashtakavarga to be definitive about something and say, you will have a lot of status because you have 42 points in the 10th, and you will have not a lot of luck in love because you only got 26 points, and your finances will be terrible because you've got 18 points in the second house, you're not going to be correct. But if you say you won't have a lot of financial opportunities, 18 points, and then you say you won't have strong partnership opportunities, or you won't have a lot of opportunity to work with your partners, and then you go to the 10th house, you go, you'll have a lot of opportunity for career advancement. But what if the person is scared of being in control, scared of being in charge and timid and hidden? Then do you think they're going to want to take advantage of any career opportunities that come their way where they have to be the boss and tell people what to do? No, they're not going to. They're going to, they're going to balk when those opportunities come. Okay? So use it in that context. Now, across the spectrum of humanity, we're going to get an average profile. I mean, we'll get some people who are power hungry and some people who abhor power. And so over the averages, the points that happen in the 10th house will be in the 10th house will be relatively accurate or perfectly accurate. Within a person of average health, if you get a person who's got of average health, which means they don't have any yogas that are really denying things in a huge way, and you don't get any yogas that are really giving them an abundance of something. So you get your average chart without big extremes of no way on this and super yes on that. Charts without those things. For those average charts with average yogas and stuff, you're going to find the Ashtakavarga to be more definitive because they're not having tendencies and yogas and stuff that are completely pulling them away from a house or focusing on them on a house to a huge degree. Okay, so we're working within that relative zone of accuracy. Okay, but over a spectrum of a lot of clients, if you only used Ashtakavarga, say that's the only technique you did, you didn't even look at the chart and the planets, you didn't care where the planets were, you just looked at Ashtakavarga, then on some people you would fail dramatically because they would have some yoga that really changed it or a mental state that really changed it. And a lot of charts you would just be amazing with your predictions, and then or some charts you'd be these amazing predictions because their yogas and mental state would line up with the good and bad points. So if they have yogas for bad marriage, they have and a mental state that doesn't like intimacy and partnership, then they would have, and they have low points in the 7th, you're going to hit it perfectly. And then with your average person, you'll have pretty average good predictions. But across the complete spectrum of all your clients, if you just use Ashtakavarga, while you might really hit it sometimes and really miss it other times, your average predictions will be good enough, will be pretty good. So, again, Ashtakavarga is astrology for dummies, including, especially the SarvaAshtakavarga is more astrology for dummies than any other part of Ashtakavarga there is. And so with this Sarva, we'll be able to, across our clientele basis, do a decent job. But on individuals, at times we will utterly fail just with Ashtakavarga, and other times we'll do remarkable just with Ashtakavarga. And that's okay, because overall, over the board of all of our clients, we can do pretty good with Ashtakavarga. But be aware of those pitfalls when you use it. And so it's always good to examine the chart with other techniques, if you want to have a higher predictive accuracy. And that's true with any technique. It's always worthwhile to look deeper into other things you can do. Okay, so that's the cautions on SarvaAshtakavarga. Now, what SarvaAshtakavarga does is it lets us see how much a supported planet is able to benefit a house. So the planet's supported, it's traveling through a sign, a house, and therefore it's able to help that house. Okay? If the person doesn't sabotage it themselves. And, I've seen some people who get so many opportunities in life because they have a really good 10th house or a really strong first house. Those houses can give a lot of opportunities. But then there's things in them that they never follow through on the opportunities completely. Yet they'll dip their foot in the swimming pool and never go swimming, even though they live in a in a land of where everyone has a swimming pool. So that's what you'll find in those extremes. Okay, but we're going to assume that we're dealing with average people who don't have such extreme combinations in their chart. They're just kind of like, okay, baseline people. And then these points are going to show, then basically they're going to relate to the environment in a more, in a way that's more in line with the environment and not in a way that's made extreme because of their inner nature. Okay? So we can judge the health. I like to look at it sometimes and break it down and look into angles first. And I decided to use the North Indian charts because we're really going to focus on houses right now. When I focus on houses, I like North Indian charts. And for those of you who don't remember, by pushing the F2 key, you can scroll through the different types of houses and call it. So we'll be using some North Indian charts now. For those of you who are from North India can be happy, and the rest of you will be upset for a few days. So I like to just look at the angles first. The angles are the efforts, the actions that people take for different things. The first house are the actions they take to be someone. How much does the environment support their actions to be who they are? Okay? If you find high points in the first house, you get a person that their environment, the world around them, allows them to be and become what they are to a larger degree than average. That might be indicated by a childhood where they're utterly neglected. Their parents don't tell them to do anything, and so they have all this time to figure out who they are and what they want to do with themselves. Okay? You'll actually find that sometimes with high Ashtakavarga points. Other times you'll find that they have a parent that the child's nature aligns with that parent, and the things that the parent wants them to do, they just love it, and they go, oh wow, this is perfect, Dad, and they're just running with it. Who knows what it is? There's something supporting, there's a planet supporting them becoming what they are. If it's Saturn, it's solitude. If it's the sun, it's the father. You know, and you can look and say which planets are supporting. Like in this person, we can see the moon, the mother, Mercury, friends, are going to support who this person is more than other things. Venus, their marriage, will support who they are least of all, with only 2 points there. Okay? So you can, again, break it down and see what planet's supporting this house. But to start with, we just say, okay, is this house supported? The first house, when it has high points, the world is supporting them in who they are. Okay? If it's low points, the world is not supporting them in who they are. So they might have parents that insist on them doing things all the time that aren't who they are, and they have no time to even begin exploring. You know, I saw a person had less than 20 points in the first house. And growing up in life, they never were given the chance to explore who they were and what they could do for themselves. They never were able to explore themselves as a person. There just wasn't much opportunity for that. There was always something else that, you know, life, you know, the environment kind of coerced them or pushed them into doing more. Okay? So that's what we look at when we see the first house. When we look at the 10th house, we see the opportunities for the person to do bigger things. Is the world supporting their opportunities to do, to act, to do? The first house is the world supporting your activity to be. And ultimately, what you are, you need to act upon it, which is the 10th house. Okay, and then there's a strong relationship between the first and 10th. And they're really the two most important houses in your birth chart, the first house and the 10th house. So, so looking at that, so in this person, we can see with 42 points, there's a lot of, the environment is really supporting her action to be in charge, to take her material concerns into her own hands, into her own power, okay? Because that's what the 10th house is about. It's your material concerns. It's your material obligations and acting in order to fulfill your material obligations. The world is very much going to support this person in being able to, you know, to do that, okay? Well, when this person got divorced, yes, they did, and part of the reason they did, because 26 points here is not supporting great partnership time. They did get divorced, and after that, they became self-employed the rest of their life. So they went from having no job to being self-employed and having their own business throughout, you know, for the majority of their life, because, you know, their marriage was so long, and after that, they lived for a very long time and always as a self-employed person. So they never worked for this person. This person was never worked for anybody. 42 points. Okay? Now, in a woman's chart, strong points in the 10th house and even strong points in the 4th house can make her a career wife, meaning the woman who stays at home, takes care of the kids, which is like if you have 1 kid, it's 2 full-time jobs, and for every kid after that, it's like another full-time job. So this person did that. They were a career wife. There's their words. They were like, I was a career wife, and then I got divorced when the kids grew up, and then I started my own business. That was this person's life. So you can see the world really supported her 10th house activities, okay, in the sense of doing the marital role that a woman will take upon herself when the 4th or 10th has strong points, and then just after that role was finished, the self-employed role, okay. And the angles are really important, and they're always important in the chart because, again, they're the primary actions we take. Did the world support a lot of actions, her 7th house actions for partnership? No, she was married. However, there wasn't that much partnership time. Eventually, there was a divorce. And after those 20-some years of marriage, of raising kids, after that, she was never married again, and her relation activity was always minimal. Even when she was married, her relationship activity was minimal. Okay? You know, it wasn't supported a lot by the environment. Okay? And part of that in the context of Ashtakavarga. Then her 4th house, which are the actions to be happy. You know, the first initial actions to be happy, that's the 4th house. And so that has to do with taking actions to see what we feel, taking actions to see what we need. That's all 4th house things. When a person has low points in the 4th house, their environment is not supporting them taking the time to see how they feel and taking the time for them to even just contemplate what their needs are. So that's what the 4th house is. It's a hidden house. The 10th house is so obvious. You see the person taking those actions. But while a person's doing everything they do, there's a part of their consciousness that's dwelling on itself, that's hidden, that's invisible. The 4th house is the most hidden thing. And that's the part of us that's going, how am I going to be happy? What do I need to be happy? You know, what will make me happy? Okay? How can I move towards a happier existence? You know, that hope, that whatever you want to call it, that idea is always part of every action we do. Underneath, hidden behind every action we do, is this idea of, I want this action to make me happy. That's the 4th house. There are polarities, they're opposites, right? So when one gets strong, the other one gets affected too. So the 4th house with low points, like in this case, shows the world is not really supporting the person in the pursuit of their happiness, to do the things that make them happy, that might make them happy, to explore their emotional needs. The world is giving them lots of support in providing for their material needs and taking actions for their material needs, but not so much for their emotional needs. So now here we have an opposition of, well, right from Ashtakavarga we could tell this is a person who works too much and doesn't deal with her emotions enough. Okay, why? Is it because she doesn't want to? Well, a lot of it is because of the fact that her world around her environment doesn't support it. So when you have 5 kids and you're raising 5 kids and your husband's gone most of the time, you don't have a lot of time to start feeling about what would make you happy, you know? And then after that, when you're struggling with your job to make a living and support yourself financially, you don't always have a lot of time. And this person had to work very hard. The more points in the 10th house, the harder a person is encouraged by the world to work. When points are low in the 10th house, a person gets to be lazy. They don't have to do that much. You know, the world's not supporting them in doing a whole lot. As a result, they won't do as much, but they might still get rewarded for it. And that's the fun thing about Ashtakavarga, as you'll see. Sometimes people do a lot and are rewarded a lot or rewarded little. And that's what we're going to learn here soon. Okay? So just be aware of that for the moment. So 4th house are those actions. So this person's life was not really supported in those actions. Okay? Then we get So after I look at the angles, I like to look at the trines to those angles. Okay. Oh, let me say one other thing about the first and seventh house. These are also polarity houses. First house is the environment supporting a person to be themselves, and the seventh house is the environment supporting them to be in partnership. Ideally, this should be relatively balanced. If a person's not, the world's not supporting the person to find who they are and be who they are, and instead it's supporting them to be in partnership a lot with high points in the seventh, then this is a person who the world is supporting getting lost in a relationship. On the other hand, if the points in the first house are a lot higher, the world will be supporting them to be who they are, but they'll feel lonely because the low points in the seventh house won't be supporting them in their relationships and having someone to share themselves with. We're happiest when we develop as a person, first house, find out who we are, and then share that unique thing that we are with other people. Most significantly with a significant other, but with any people in general. The seventh house is the house of the public as well. It's just sharing with people, okay? It's sharing with people who embrace you. So like the Beatles were embraced by the public. They shared and the public opened their arms to them, right? Well, when we share ourselves, people, the world, opening their arms to us, an individual opening their arms, or the entire world, or a certain group of people opening their arms to us, that's the seventh house. And we're happiest when there's a balance between that. Just as we're happiest when there's a balance between how much actions we take and how much happiness the world allows us to provide. So you can learn a lot about a person just by judging this. So based on this, we can see, well, you really didn't develop so much as a person. You really didn't spend that much time finding who you were because of this lower first house. Your partnership activities weren't that great, but at least they were balanced. You know what I mean? At least they were balanced. But this house, the 10th house and 4th house, are badly unbalanced. A lot of work, and not a lot of happiness in life. Okay? And this was a person who literally, when you talked to her, you just felt this feeling of, here's a person who works so much and doesn't have enough happiness. You could just feel it in that person when they come in for a consult, because there's dramatic difference, a 16-point difference between these houses. All right, so after I look at those main angle houses, those are the houses where a person's expending a lot of energy. Expending energy in the sense of using energy to start something. It doesn't take that much energy to start something, though, but it's an important use of the energy, to get something going in a certain direction. Once something's going in a certain direction, it can take off and have a life of its own. But the first house, the angular houses are taking that first step always. It's like if you write a book, writing that first line is the hardest line you're going to write in the book. That's an angular house. Once you get a good first line, the book will actually start supporting itself, and that's what like the 2nd, 5th, 8th, and 11th houses are like. And then finally you got to wrap that book up. That also is really hard. In fact, wrapping up the book takes a lot more energy than beginning the book. That's the 12th, 3rd, 6th, and 9th houses. That's where we wrap something up. And those are the houses that take the most energy. Okay? But the most important use of an energy is that first house, to just get the ball moving. So, that's another way you can look at it. You want to move a ball, say a big rock. You want to push it somewhere, whether it's the self rock, the happiness, emotional rock, the partnership rock, or the career rock. First, it takes this tremendous burst of energy to push the rock and get it moving. But after that, it just kind of starts rolling on its own. Every once in a while, you give it a nudge and you keep it going. But now you want that rock to go to a certain specific place and end up somewhere to say, okay, the rock is right where I want it. At that point, it takes a lot of shifting and adjusting and pushing the rock back and forth, and oftentimes a lot of struggle to get the rock exactly where you want it to be. That's wrapping it up. So I kind of look at those analogies to help you understand these houses, because this is going to become really important as we use Ashtakavarga. So after I look at the angular houses, I like to sort of look at the trine houses to those. So starting with the first house. The first house is the person discovering who they are. The fifth house is the consistency in who they are, the consistency in being that. All right, you decide, I'm an astrologer, and you go and you sign up for an astrology course. All right, you've written the first line in your story of your life that I'm an astrologer. But now the fifth house has to keep that ball rolling. That's the consistency of who you are, the consistency of being who you are. Is the world supporting that consistency of being who you are? Okay? Or is the world like taking you away from that? So in this person, you know, being who they are is not really being supported, but at least, because 26 is a little on the low side, so it's not dramatically supported, it's a little unsupported. But then the consistency with being what they have decided they're going to be is relatively average. It's exactly average, 28 points. Okay? And then the ninth house from there is the house of like the conclusion of who you are, the result of that effort to be something, the actual story that you wrote. Okay? That's the conclusion of the book always. And so in the ninth house, that's the fulfillment of your purpose. How much has the world supported the fulfillment of your purpose? Okay, which was initiated upon you deciding what you are. Once we decide I am this, that becomes our purpose. How consistent we are in that, how much the world allows us to be consistent is the fifth house, and how much we realize out of that is the ninth house. So in this person, we see the ninth house is the highest. So that's nice in the context that while the world didn't really support their consistency in being they are, and there wasn't even that much time to support discovering who they were, the world did discover them becoming a great version of that, the best, a really good version of that, considering how much opportunity they had. Okay? Then we can look at like the Artha houses. That's 10th, 6th, and 10th, 2nd, and 6th houses. So the 10th house is our actions, our material actions. So this person is really supported in taking material actions. They're going to take a lot of material actions. The second house is the wealth that results in. Okay? In the sense of let's say this, the ability that allows them to continue that in a way that provides for security. Okay, so for instance, let's say you start a job and then you go to work and you really aren't very good at it. Okay, you're just not that skilled at it, and so you don't you're not that resourceful with what you're trying to do. The second house is our resources. It's our ability to sort of get through the next step of our life, to get through the day, to manage what's upon us, our skills that we can depend on. Not our developing skills or the skills we have fun or our hobbies, but the skills that we can depend on that are going to get us through the day. The money we have that's going to get us through the day. Any resources that helps us get done what we have to do. The 10th house is taking action for our material responsibilities. The biggest part of that action is going to work for 8 hours every day. Okay, that's one of the big actions we take towards our material responsibilities. But then, while that's where we take the most time, there's a bigger part of that, and that is managing our material lives. Literally just managing our lives. And our entire life is management. Our entire life is material. If we manage it, it's material. So let's say you want to meditate, and you figured out you're going to meditate from 8 to 9 every morning. That's still managing your material life. It's managing your day, a concrete thing in your life, a day that once passed you no longer have. It's no different than having $1,000. Once spent, it's gone. So the 10th house is how we manage our lives. Are we in control of our lives? High Ashtakavarga points in the 10th says you're in control of your life. You get to manage your life. And everything we manage is material, somehow. And then there's our, our actual ability to manage it. You know, do we have the financial resources? Do we have the practical abilities to really manage it? And that's where the second house comes into play. So this person is given a lot of opportunity to manage their material life, but their ability to do so is not great. Their second house only gets 18 points, which means the world doesn't really support their ability to do a really good job. And that's going to make a person have to struggle a lot more. Okay, that's like starting a job and then going to work and finding out you're not good at it. Okay, so this person's given the opportunities to run her life, okay, with 42 points up here, to be in charge, to be in power of her life, but she's not that great at it, which is 18 points there. Okay, and again, it's not to say she's not a skillful person, it's just the environment is not going to support her in being great at it, which means the things the environment needs her to respond to are not going to be the things that she's good at responding to, and the things she's good at responding to, the environment's rarely going to ask them of her. You understand how that works? The second house is a very receptive house. If we think about it, in the natural zodiac, the second house is Taurus, where the moon's exalted. And the second house is the Varga for the second house is the Hora. And the most important planet in the Hora is the moon. And so it just shows how the second house is, how dependent we are about, you know, how dependent the second house is upon the influences of the environment. Because the moon is all about reacting to the influences of the environment. A good second house says, I'm responding to the influences of the environment in such a way that I'm always doing good. A bad second house is, I'm responding to the influences of the environment in ways that don't work. Okay? It's a super important house. You'll find in general in people's lives that I always say nodes and angles are tough. But the most difficult place to have Rahu or Ketu is across the second and eighth house axis. Because then you've got a node in the second house, which means the person is very restricted in how they're responding to the world around them. And that's going to reduce their sense of well-being and security, their prosperity. Prosperity is the ability to have what you need when you have it. The best way to have what we need, the best way to have prosperity of having what we need when we need it, is being able to adapt to what we have around us, to be able to find a use for it, to use what we have to make our lives work. That's what resourceful means. To me, resourceful doesn't mean you have $1 million in the bank. It means you can get dropped anywhere on planet Earth, in any environment, in any condition, and come out okay. That's what resourcefulness is, right? That's really what the second house is. And that's about, and that everyone has resourceful abilities. But if you've got low points in the second house, like this person, what the environment is demanding of you is not part of your resources. So it's like being stuck in India with, you know, say you're stuck in India with old rupee notes, old 500 rupee notes that you can't spend anymore and you can't exchange anymore, but you have $1 million worth of them. But because of the new financial system in India, as of a few months ago, you can't spend those notes in India anymore. So that's what it's like to have low points in the 18th house. The things you do have aren't going to cut it in the world you're stuck in, or the situations that present themselves. And this was very much true for this person. So this person always felt like they were struggling. This was a high-stressed client. Every time they came, you could just tell the second house was getting them. They were struggling with the fact that what they had was never what the situation demanded of them. Okay? And so, of course, when we look at the Artha trine, the 10th, the 6th, and the 10th, 2nd, and 6th house, which is your houses of material well-being, of being okay in a concrete way, those low points are going to make it really rough on her in that second house. Then we have the 6th house, the last of the Artha houses, the houses of material well-being, and it has high points. So the 6th house is your ability to ultimately survive. Okay, to struggle to survive. It's basically the house of making you a survivor. No matter what happens, there's a part of us that can just struggle to survive. That can do whatever it takes to survive. You know, the guy who cuts his arm off when he's stuck on a cliff because his hand's jammed in a crack. You've heard of that guy. Cut his own arm off so he could survive. That's what the sixth house is like, you know. It's that animal need of doing whatever it takes to survive. It's like the wolf who gets caught in a trap and chews his own foot off so he can get away. So that's just that survival instinct. And so the sixth house is just, is the world going to support their struggle to survive? So there's a point where we just have to do anything to get through the day. We just have to do whatever it takes to survive, or to do what needs to get done. At that point, we start trying to do anything possible. But is the environment going to support that to a conclusion that allows you to survive? If there's high points in the sixth, yes. If there's low points, no. So if there's high points, the wolf chews through his foot and escapes and lives. If there's low points, the wolf starts chewing through his foot, and right when he's almost done, the hunter shows up and shoots him in the head with a shotgun. So you see, the environment, the hunter got there a little too soon. Okay, the person who's who struggles, tries anything, but the environment supports it or not. So two people fall in a pit, in a different pit. One person falls in a pit and decides that whatever it takes, they're going to climb that wall. No matter how scary it is, they're going to climb up the wall. And so they go for it. And they start climbing up the wall, and they get out, and they save themselves. And the wall was good, hard clay that they could, chip away at the clay, get a good handhold, and go up. Another person falls in a pit, and they decide no matter what, they're going to climb out of that pit. And they start trying to climb, but the walls of the pit are mostly of a sandy type material. And the more they climb, the more dirt they dump on themselves until they finally, cause a little avalanche of sand that totally causes them to get, to get buried alive. So the environment has to support our struggles. We try our best. We struggle to survive. And high points shows the environment supports that struggle, gives them more opportunities that if they struggle, they will survive. Okay? When they're sick and they're struggling to find a way to get better, the high points in the sixth house show there is ways in the world. Ways exist for them to get better. And so as they struggle to get better, they can find those ways and get better. Low points in the sixth house, as they struggle for those ways and try to find those ways, the environment is just not supporting that. Okay? So a good sixth house is the house that helps, where the environment is helping a person, giving the person more opportunities to get out of any troubles that would severely hurt their material life. Sixth house is such an important house. If your material life is hurt, all parts of your life start going downhill, right? So a good sixth house shows you always can find a way to struggle to make your material life work. So, and material life means keeping a body, which is your most valuable material possession, right? So this person has high points in the sixth house. So this person would fight tooth and nail to survive. They were a real fighter, and they always found a way to climb out of that pit. In fact, when they were sick, towards their last years, they were sick. Their doctors gave them at most 2 years to live with the condition they had. She went on for another 10 years. And all of her friends, the doctors, no one who knew her could believe that she was still alive. They would look at her and they'd see her, and she just looked like she couldn't be alive. She looked that sick that anyone who saw her said, "How is that woman still walking?" And she'd not only be walking, she'd still be doing astrology, So just someone who was just really capable of struggling to survive, to keep that body, with that strong sixth house. And it can be any type of survival, material survival, financial survival, whatever needs to be done, whatever has to be done. High points in that sixth house show as the person struggles to get to the next day, the environment either supports their struggles or not. For her, they're very supported, and she always could find a way. For someone with low points in the seventh house, they can struggle and they can struggle, and the opportunities to succeed are so much less. Okay? So as a result, they'll have more problems getting well. They'll have more problems sorting out their finances. So this person has a very interesting Arthur trine, because we got two super high houses and a very low house. So these two high houses have to make up for that low house, and overall she manages to survive materially to her 70s without ever having to live on the streets. But luckily she had plenty of points from these other houses to loan to that house. This house is 10 points short of 28, the average. So we could take 10 points out of the 10th house and get 28 points there and still have 32 points here. So still have 2 points above average. So between these three houses, we have more than 3 times 28 points. So she's going to do fine in her material life, is the conclusion, in her Artha life. Okay? We look at her self-life, becoming the individual that she's meant to be, living a life of Dharma and growing to more of who she is. We got average in Leo, 5th house, 2 points less than average. We're going with a 28-point average here in Aries, 5 points more here. So by dropping 2 points over to Aries, we got every house with at least 28, but nothing above 30. So she's just very average in that. Okay? And so, people weren't amazed at her ability and what she was, and said, wow, you're an amazing person. No one ever told her that. But they were like, wow, it's amazing how you can keep going, how you can make your life work, how you can keep alive, how you can keep that body, how you can, keep that body, and how you can, keep going financially. And she was still working when she was half dead. People couldn't see how she was alive. She was still making money to survive at that point. Everyone was amazed at her ability to just keep on going and manage her material life at a point when most people would have been in a home. Okay, or had one of their kids take care of them. This person just kept chugging along. The last 3 months or so, her daughter had to come take care of her. And at that point, she couldn't even move. So really quite an amazing example of some high points in the 6th and even high points in the Artha houses. Okay, then we've got the 4th house, the happiness houses. And these are the moksha houses, the houses of freedom. Okay? Well, freedom, why do we want to be free? Because we want to feel good. Really, freedom is a state of happiness. Happiness is freedom. We really can't argue. Like the American Constitution, the rebels, they wanted to rebel against England because they wanted life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Freedom and the pursuit of happiness. Life, they already were alive. They had life. They just didn't feel the freedom to pursue, the liberty to pursue happiness. And so they decided to have a rebellion. But there's a link between happiness and freedom, because freedom is health. Freedom from physical disease is health. Freedom from emotional disease is health. And freedom from mental disease is health. The things we need freedom from is disease, particularly emotional and mental disease. And so the 4th house is just the house, I want to be happy, which means I want to be free of disease mentally and emotionally, because it's really the only thing that ruins our happiness is mental and emotional health. Becoming mentally and emotionally healthy leads to the next step of liberation, which is the ultimate moksha, the ultimate freedom. And that's where a person becomes perfectly mentally healthy and perfectly emotionally healthy. That's what liberation really is. Especially perfectly mentally healthy. But of course, that doesn't happen until a person is perfectly emotionally healthy. So this whole moksha trine of 4th, 8th, and 12th, the trine of spiritual liberation, is really just the trine of happiness. Okay? So with respect to that, we have the actions to become happy. Does the world support us to take actions to be happy? Does it give us the time to contemplate? Does it give us the time to see what we need? This person, not so much. Low on that. Okay, the world really didn't support that a lot for her. Okay, The world is supporting her in other activities, particularly those Artha houses. Okay? So it's not a whole lot of, not supporting those actions, but it's supporting the conclusions and the, and the progression of that. The 8th house is the progression of that. Okay? Meaning that you started working on your happiness, but are you really able to do the deep work to allow for the happiness? The 8th house is this very mysterious house. First of all, it's the house of longevity. In this context, we're looking at it as a moksha house. Okay? We have longevity as long as we're working on our emotional health. Then we have longevity. Okay? As long as we're working on becoming healthier, emotionally and mentally, not physically, emotionally and mentally, we have longevity. This is why people, a lot of people say, oh, I'm not going to be worried, about, it's not how I want to say it. A lot of people say, I want to change my karma. I can change my karma. I can change my fate. That's in my horoscope. But really, the only thing that can really be changed in your chart is if a person's making a sincere spiritual effort, their guru or God can grant them extra longevity. People are making sincere efforts. And you'll hear cases of this, of truth seekers who are really sincere disciples who should have died, but their guru intervenes and allows them to continue onward. And sometimes they live for many, many years onward. So this 8th house is this house of maintaining the emotional and mental progress towards greater health. Okay? And growing emotionally and mentally. That's the deepest connotation of the 8th house. That's why it's the house of the occult studies, the astrology, and any occult study of trying to understand what's going on inside of us and trying to create health there. Tantra is an 8th house thing. The whole sciences of Tantra, which is about trying to get deep down into inside a person and work out those negative energies and have more positive energies within them. All this work we do to clear our emotional and mental bodies out of disease is the 8th house. The need to do that and the actions to do that, to initiate that, is the 4th house. But the actual work of that is the 8th house. And if we're doing that work, we live longer. If we don't do that work, we get a fatal disease and die. Cancer that people die from is a result of not doing enough of that work. Anyone who's survived cancer, naturally without chemo, which is not a survival of cancer, it's just a suppression to another level and death from something later down the road. But people who have actually survived cancer, they've all had to make huge mental and emotional shifts in order to survive. Fasting alone wasn't going to do it. They all had to make huge mental emotional shifts. So this 8th house is the house of longevity, but that's just a secondary thing. If you're mentally, emotionally working things out, you avoid the chronic diseases that destroy your health. The 8th house are the chronic diseases that shorten our longevity. The 6th house are the day-to-day struggles. So avoiding an auto accident, running away from a lion, getting enough, making sure you have enough to eat that day to survive healthily, having healthy food that day. That's all 6th house stuff. That's all, I got to do this now to survive. But the 8th house are the chronic diseases that destroy our longevity. And those chronic diseases are manifestations of mental and emotional disease. And by increasing our longevity, which means to clear out those mental and emotional diseases through deep inner work, through psychology, transformation, tantra, yoga, all that stuff, a person grows into a healthier mental and emotional state, and their chronic diseases dissipate, and they can live longer. Okay? So that's what that house is for. Then the final house of happiness and becoming free, so that they're really doing that hard work of becoming emotionally free and physically free or mentally free of disease, of taking the disease out and throwing it out of us and purging it which is a painful process. It's the good old 8th house process. And even having physical symptoms of disease is part of that process. That's the 8th house. And then the 12th house is the result of that. The liberation, the actual freedom, the letting go of everything. It's important in the sense that ultimately we have to let go of everything. We have to release it all. We can't just come to terms with the fact that we're emotionally damaged because of what our parents did. Okay, I'm emotionally damaged because I was abused by my parents. All right, that's not enough. You have to let it go. You have to completely release that and surrender that and let it go, so it completely it's completely out of your body, out of your consciousness, and no longer part of your psyche. That's the 12th house, the house of surrender and letting go of all the disease. The 8th house is when we get in there like all nasty with the disease and we're really fighting with it and coming to terms with it. We have to let it go at some point. And when we let it go, we're liberated from it. We're free of that disease. And then we go back to the 4th house and say, I feel happier, but I feel there's more happiness to have. I still have my demons. I'm not completely happy. I'm not happy enough. And then we go back into the 8th house and struggle with some more demons, and we beat the demons and throw the demons out of the 12th house, and now we're more free of those diseases. Okay? So that's what the Artha happiness thing is doing. If those points are high, if the 4th house is high in points, a person's life affords them the opportunity to let go of, affords them the opportunity to understand, but that give time to their needs and what they need to do emotionally to be happy. So it lets them be aware of their needs and their emotional pains. Life supports that. Okay, just the environment around them supports that. That usually means an environment that's peaceful and allows for contemplation and gives them enough time to just be with themselves and to be with their feelings and to see what's going on inside of them. Okay? Then there's the 8th house, which is the environment supporting them in that process somehow and supporting them in really getting rid of the disease. An environment that supports a person to get rid of the disease is an environment that doesn't have the disease in it. Okay? So let's just look on a physical level. If you're getting disease from petroleum fumes, if you've got a disease from petroleum fumes that's poisoning your body, and you start taking some therapies that reduce the effects of petroleum fumes, but you live in an environment right next to a petroleum plant, you're really going to have the environment's not supporting you getting well, so it's going to be harder to get well. It's the same with that. With the low 8th house points, it shows the environment you're getting, that the environment is not supporting your healing process. Your environment, in fact, is providing for the disease that you have. It's supporting the disease process. Okay, so that could mean being in situations, say you get psychologically damaged in certain situations as a youth. Then as an adult, you still are always constantly having situations that have the same kind of psychological strain and pressure on you. So you're still dealing with that in your space. The environment is still not supportive of your disease. High points in the 8th house is an environment and people who are actually supporting you out to heal in your disease process. Okay? So the people that they're with, the demands that people make on them heals. Everyone makes demands on people. It's impossible to have somebody around someone without making demands on them and them making demands on you. But if the demands that the people make on a person support their disease, their mental and emotional difficulties, then the person has a harder time healing. If their demands support the opposite of that, if their demands support the person in doing the opposite, then they can heal for them. So let's take a simple case. Let's take an introverted person who's introverted to a pathological degree. Say they have people in their lives that manipulate the person because they're introverted. Because that person's introverted, they can use that person in a certain way and get away with it. So they do it. So this person's in an environment that's not supporting that. But let's instead say they meet someone who pulls on that person to extrovert them and encourages them to be extroverted and encourages them for new experiences, then that's an environment that's healing the person. Okay? And you'll see this sometimes in a person who, like a kid, who grows up in a really toxic family. So he's got a lot of, self-esteem issues and emotional burdens, let's say. And they have a teacher, and the teacher sees something in them and encourages them out of their disorder. And the kid starts becoming a healthier person. That's what the eighth house is. And ultimately, you'll learn that the 8th house is the house of devotion. In the 20th Varga, which is the Varga of devotion, of worship, the 8th house is the key house. And so a person clings to things in their environment with devotion. They cling to it. Is that thing that they're clinging to supporting their disease, or is it supporting their health? When it's low points in the 8th house, the things in the environment for them to cling to, the very best things that the environment gives them, still support their disease more than it supports their health. So these people, to heal when there's low points in that, the environment's not going to help them. It might seem to help them for a little while, but it's always going to trick them. It's actually just going to be the disease under the disguise of a cure. Okay? So that's like the doctor says, this will make you better, and you take the medicine and it makes you better for a week, and then you're sicker a month later or a year later or 2 years later. That's what happens with the low 8th house. Even when good things come that in the environment are there that can seem healing, over the long run, they're probably going to just be another form of something that deals, that gives the poison. Okay? So a person is going to be stuck in a more toxic environment that doesn't support their healing when the 8th house points are low. When the 8th house points are high, they get the environment that supports their healing and their healing process more, which allows them to throw disease out more. Okay? Then we have the 12th house. The 12th house is the house of letting go of it, of just being able to let go of it. And it's a similar thing to the 12th house or the 8th house. These are both Dashtanas, two of the difficult houses. The 8th and 12th are the two of the three difficult houses, right? And they're all part of the happiness trine. That's why being happy is the hardest thing, because two of the most difficult houses are part of the happiness trine, which tells us one thing: you can't be happy without going through a lot of difficulties, for one. But the 12th house is the house that supports letting go of it, at the final letting go of it, so that it's not part of a person's reality anymore. And when the points are high in that house, the environment supports letting go of that, meaning somehow things in their environment help them make peace with it, to forgive and forget and to move on. When the points are low, they're not able to. So this person here has got low points in every one of these houses. So that means the world never supported her health, her mental, emotional healing, and to happiness and freedom. Okay? With the low points in the 4th house, she was always too busy to really spend too much time figuring out her needs. Okay? The environment didn't support her healing with only 20 points in the 8th house. Nor did the environment support her letting go of things. So things from literally this woman, things from the past used to come back and haunt her 20 years later. Okay? The next video, I'm also going to use this chart for another technique, and you'll get a better understanding of that. But literally, this person, events from the past used to come back and haunt her. It's like the environment just did not support her letting go of the things that hurt her. By letting go, I mean making peace with them internally, to surrender to what had happened, to let go of what had happened. As a result, you can just see by this trine, the world did not support this person's happiness. And I had this person as a client for years, for many, many years, for like literally probably about 15 years. This person was my client, 14, 15 years. And also someone who studied astrology, Western astrology and then Vedic astrology. And the last few years of this person's life, because they'd always just been miserable. I was like shaking my head, and just every time after I talk to them, I think to myself, why don't you just go die, for crying out loud? Just die. You're abjectly miserable, and you're hanging on like life is the only thing. So you see the contrast? We have so many high points in the Artha trine, the material well-being, the struggle to stay alive on planet Earth. That's the material trine, right? Because our most important possession is our body. Material trine is the trine of keeping our material life together, which means our body together to a large degree. So much energy to do that. The highest points are in that trine. The lowest points are in the water trine, the moksha trine. So such little happiness. And so this person just kept alive, even though they had really what was not a very happy life. So it was actually, and I was just thinking, you're so unhappy, and you're just not becoming happier. Just, why are you staying alive? It was just shocking to me that they still just kept alive. But that's what you'll see with these houses. These houses are opposite houses. The material life and the emotional life. The 10th house and its trines, and the 4th house and its trines. The happiest people will have those balanced. Okay? You want those balanced. And why do you want to balance? So that it's worth living on planet Earth, basically. Okay? When there's more on the Earth signs, from an emotional point of view, it's really not worth living here. Even though the person might do many great things with the strong 10th house. They might just do great things, concrete things that help other people even. Second house is the house of taking care of other people too. So a person can have this powerful Earth trine and actually give so much to the world and do a lot for the world and who knows what, but be in charge of a lot of what happens on Earth. But still, if their happiness is much less, if the world isn't supporting their happiness, it becomes for a miserable experience of someone who's doing a lot, providing a lot to the world, but the world is not supporting and being happy. And that was very much the case with this person. Okay? All right, then we can go to the Kama trine, the trine of desires, okay, which has to do with people, all right, largely. So we have the 7th house, which is acting upon our needs to share, acting upon our needs to be with people. A strong 7th house supports that need and gives opportunities for being with people and helps a person initiate and begin things with people. This person was a little low on that. Okay? As a result, they didn't have a lot of people in their lives. The 11th house is the house of, we can say, belonging to people. Okay? It's the house of groups and peers, of belonging to people. And it's even a house of belonging to your spouse, your partner. But it's anyone you belong to in any capacity at all. Okay, that for some reason you've decided that on some level we have a connection, some belonging. That's the 11th house. So this person, when they met someone, they really felt like they belonged to that person. When they connected to someone, they really felt like they belonged to them. So this person, they had these low points. They didn't connect with a lot of people. They didn't share themselves a lot. But when they did, they were really committed. This person was a very committed student. They were a very committed person for readings. I was surprised how committed they were to me. Once they decided I was their astrologer, they were committed to me, And so I had this long, committed relationship with this person. There's not many clients I kept around for 14, 15 years. And if she hadn't died, I probably would still have her around, So this 11th house has a lot to do with the commitment of a relationship. Okay? The staying power of a relationship. In Chinese astrology, the 11th house is actually considered the house of marriage. Okay, so you can have your 7th house of intercourse, but then sticking with someone, belonging to someone, has a lot of 11th house connotations. Okay, and I've talked about the importance of the 11th house in marriage and other classes and stuff, I believe. So anyway, this means the world supports her social commitments. Okay? So once she decided I was her astrologer, nothing ever happened that made her want to change her mind. You see, the world supported that commitment, that choice she made. Okay? When she married her husband, she committed for 25 years. That's longer than average. Okay? There was good reason for her to get divorced. Yet after that, she didn't have a bunch of two-year-long relationships. She was single the rest of her life after that. So there was a solid commitment, you know. So a strong 11th house helps people commit on a social level to their groups, whoever people they want to commit to, whoever people they want to belong to. She wanted to belong to me as one of my students, and she was committed there. Okay? Never went to another astrologer after she met me. You know, just no interest in that. So, because of this strong 11th house, committed to the people she decides to commit to, and therefore the world supports her in group behavior. Okay, group behavior means there's someone there more than you, there's someone else there besides you that you're connected to. The world supported that for her. Then we've got the last house here, the associates house. This is how we actually work with people on a teammate level. Okay, so we work with them in a way that is productive. That's what a big part of the third house is in the context of this social trine, or this karma desire trine. So working with people towards a common goal, that's the third house. That's important. You have a partner, which is your wife, but you still have to work towards your common goals together, and at that point your third house is important. People with a nice third house can work towards common goals with people, including their spouse. People with a bad third house can't. So this person has average points there. She can do that to an average level. Okay, so average with a little extra points here, but basically an average trine, nothing unusually high. Okay, if we take 2 points from 30 and go to here, we're 28. And then we have nothing over 30 and everything between 25 and 30. So it's an average trine for her. Social trine was an averagely supported. Okay? Not any great extremes. But the most unique thing about her social trine was her level of sort of commitment to the people she decided to belong to. Okay? And when a woman gets married and gets divorced and never marries again, it means her sole commitment was to her spouse, right? That was her biggest life commitment to a person, was one spouse. Not a second, third, fourth spouse, but just that one. Okay, so that commitment was strong. Then you also can look at these Artha houses, these Kama houses, houses 3, 7, and 11, and compare them to your Artha houses. How much is the world supporting your social involvement compared to your individual path? So here they're equal. Okay, they're very equal. 26-26, 33-29, a 4-point difference, and 32-28, a 4-point difference. They're exactly equal. So you can see how this person felt okay about being alone when she was alone, because there was an equal of social support and self-support. Is when you see an imbalance, when you see a lot more self-support and a lot less social support, that a person feels lonely. Or if there's a lot more social support and a lot less individual support, a lot less than 1, 5, and 9, then a person feels very lost. They're very lost to who they are. Okay, this person was balanced in that. So they never came to me about, what they should be doing for their life. They never came and asked about love and relationships even. Those parts were more balanced with each other. It's when when something's out of balance that it starts really bothering us and hurting us. But where it was always about the Artha and the happiness trine. It was always these two things. She just wanted to get away and have a nice home that she could just go to and live in peace. That's what she always asked about. Should I move here? Is it a good time to buy a house? I don't want to buy a house and not be able to afford it. That's what we were always dealing with. She was always trying to find her place, her fourth house place, to go and have peace. This is the home, the fourth house, where we can go away and figure out what we need. where we can go away and work to become a healthier mental and emotional person, where we can go away and just get away from everything and let go of everything. So this is all the things she asked about, always. It was this trying that always was part of it. So she bought the house, but shortly after getting the house, she got really ill. And because she was so sick, the 12 years she lived in that house, the last 10 years she was so ill, she couldn't even enjoy living there. You know, she couldn't even do the 4th house things, the 8th house and 12th house things. The world just did not support those things for her. They were the least supported part of her life. And as a result, they died a very unhappy person, sadly. Okay? So that's the way you can use all these houses for, like, how's the world affecting the person? How is the world supporting a person in what they're doing and what they are and in their happiness and all this stuff? Also, that's how I like to use it, because that's just more important, more interesting to me. But also you can just do it on a real basic level. How is the world supporting her home? Not very good, 26 points. How is the world supporting her philosophy and teachers? Good. She even met Ernst, 33 points. She's going to have the world supporting her with teachers that actually can help her, that can support her, 33 points. How is the world supporting her relationship with her children? 28 points. Okay, about average. How is the world supporting her expenses? 20 points. Okay, she's not able to spend a lot. Okay, what does that mean to spend a lot? Spend a lot means letting go of things in order to get something better. That's what spending is. Spending is not a bad thing. Getting robbed is a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing. You know why? Because if you get robbed, you just spent a lot of money burning karma. So literally, if somebody robs you of $20,000, what they've done is they've restored your karmic bank account. And that's a good deal. It's worth it. So there's nothing we can lose. There's no money we can spend that is lost on really bad account. And so the more we let go of, the more we can become. That's the idea of that 12th house. So being able to spend a lot, being able to let go a lot, that means becoming free from burdens more, free of things, okay? So this person's not going to spend a lot with 20 points there. Okay, it's a house of expense. They're not going to spend a lot. That means they want to hold on to things. Holding on to money is no different than holding on to our pains and our diseases. We want to let go of that stuff. We want to let it flow through us. We don't want to hold on to any of that stuff. That's the healthy way of living. So high points in the 20th house, in the 12th house, will show a person who spends a lot. They'll give out a lot. They'll spend a lot. They'll give a lot. But in every act of giving, every act of losing, every time something's taken from them, there's a burden taken away from us too. Okay? So the 12th house is a very magical house. It's the Dhisthana houses, 8th house, 12th house especially, even though they can be painful houses from a material point of view, they're very rewarding houses. So don't be scared if you see high points in there. Okay, you're going to spend a lot. You're going to give a lot. But giving is what enriches a person. Spending is what enriches a person. Even when we buy a TV, we're like, I'm going to buy a TV because I want a nice big new TV. I want to sit down and enjoy TV on a big screen with good speakers. So you're spending money to have a better life. See what you're doing? When you do that, you're basically saying, I'm willing to have a better life. That's a healthy idea. People who don't want to spend are like, I'm not willing to have a better life. I'm going to be stuck in my own patterns, my old bullshit, my old patterns, my old ways. I'm going to use my old TV. I remember when me and my wife fought over this station, over what we were going to watch that night, and we got so angry at each other, and we decided that we never liked the same thing on TV because we're totally incompatible, and we got divorced because of that last fight. And every time I look at my TV, I remember that fight, but I'm going to keep it anyway. That's low points in the 12th house. Isn't it better just to throw that TV out, buy yourself a big new TV, and be glad you can watch whatever you want on it, and then find a person that likes to watch something you like on it instead by letting go of that negativity? That's what the 12th house is. And spending and giving is part of that. Giving the old TV away, giving your house away, giving an old car away, you know. that has associations to your subconsciousness. You know, everything that we've experienced a bad moment around has a subconscious hook to it. So if we had a negative experience with somebody in a certain car, every time we get in that car, our subconscious is reminded of that negative experience, and we can't let go of it. We can't completely heal from that experience. So it's a lot better just to give that car away. Okay? This will happen to such a degree. Sometimes couples will be in love, have a child, and the baby will die. And so they're sitting there in the hospital watching their baby die. And then every time they look at each other afterwards, the first thing that pops into their head is the sadness and grief of their baby dying. And it gets to the point they can't be together and they have to get divorced. So that's how powerful subconscious things are. A good 12th house lets us let go of all those things that are holding us back from freedom from our past. So don't be scared. Some books will say, oh, you don't want high points in the 12th house because you're going to spend a lot. I'm like, go ahead, spend a lot, give a lot, and enjoy the freedom that comes from that. Okay? So these dashtanas, it's a two-way street. You know, are you holding on to things materially, or are you letting go and growing inwardly? That's why they're dashtanas, because they're these very opposite things. They only can be happy in one regard. And they work for us when we use them the way they're meant to. Okay, which we use that, you know, we use that 12th house to let go of things. And we use that 8th house to be confronted with our disease and heal it and purge it. Low points on the 8th house are a person, again, whose life supports their disease. So the person can not even be aware that they have lots of problems that they need to work out, that if they worked them out, they could be happier. Isn't it better to be confronted with your disease, to have a crisis, to have your life fall apart and rip the disease out of your life? That's a high 8th house. Okay. All right, so think about those 12th and 8th houses. They're very, very mysterious houses. And you can apply what I said to them to any system of astrology. But in Ashtakavarga, we get such a nice view of the houses. Okay? And also use these for your basic material predictions. This person will have a decent income with 32 points here. They won't manage their resources that well with only 18 points in the second, though. Okay? Their partnerships, the relationships won't be that supported by their environment. Their house won't be supported by their environmental conditions. You know? Their longevity will not be supported by their environmental conditions. Because if your environment supports your disease, your longevity is being shortened. Okay? So, all the things you know about houses, you can simply apply to these houses for snapshot readings with people. And we'll do more of that with more examples. But I really wanted to explain how you can use these houses together to really actually do an Ashtakavarga reading. Like, gosh, I went an hour and 27 minutes here, which means you should be able to give a 30 to 60 minute reading just based on these Ashtakavarga points to a person. So it is a complete system. And sometimes you'll be more or less accurate depending on what the other planets are giving. But with the SarvaAshtakavarga, you can certainly talk about the environmental influences. So this person, we need to tell them, go find an environment that pushes your buttons. 20 points here. Your environment is not pushing your buttons enough. You need to push those buttons and deal with your disease. Okay? So maybe they'll go experience an environment like that. If you see low points with this 8th house, then you want some kind of yoga to boost that 8th house. You want some kind of yoga to really bring that 8th house up, because the environment isn't going to support their healing. They need a powerful 8th house yoga, or even the 8th house, like the 8th Lord interchanged with the Lagna Lord, like a Danya, misery yoga with the 8th Lord, will show that they themselves will somehow screw their lives up enough that they'll be able to get a chance to deal with their disease. But the environment with 20 points there isn't going to give them cause to deal with their disease as much as they really need to. So you want to see some nice yogas to really stir that 8th house up. And one of the yogas that stirs the 8th house up, one of the biggest ones, is an interchange between the 8th house and any other house. That's going to cause crises to people. They're going to somehow create a crisis within themselves that blows the environment up for them. Okay? And that's what you need to see otherwise. Otherwise, the person's just not going to make any growth. So these are critical houses, the 4th, 8th, and 12th. All right, I'll have to get back on the second video. We have a lot more to do with these Sarva points. Thank you.